My name is Kathy Fun. I use the pronouns she, her, and today I'll be going through the introduction to redistricting. As Elena mentioned before, all of the materials can be found on our website, www.redistrictingcommunitycollege.com. And so you can follow along today, but don't worry if you miss some notes, you'll also be able to go back and find those slides as well as eventually a recording of this video. So next, where are we? We are in part 1 of a 6-part curriculum. Next, and we'll be talking now about a couple different things. What is redistricting? Why does it matter? And why do we organize to put our community on the map? Next. So let's start with what is redistricting. Redistricting is when we draw lines so that each district has the same number of people. The US Constitution requires that political districts of the same type have the same number of people. This is called the principle of population equality. You'll sometimes see the term equipopulous, equal population. Sometimes you'll even hear the phrase one person, one vote. At every level of redistricting, this is the first rule that has to be followed. The goal of population equality is to make sure that each legislator is representing the same number of people. So let's say we have a city with 20 people. Next. In this city, we have 4 council districts. So you take the total population of the city, 20, you divide it by the total number of districts, here it's 4, and you get the ideal population for each district, 5. You are aiming to have 5 people in each district to have population equality. Now notice I said people. In redistricting, we draw districts using the total number of people. We do not exclude people based on citizenship or age. This rule of drawing districts with equal population applies to all levels of government, whether that's congressional, your state legislature, your county, your city council, or even school board districts. Next. Over time, children are born, people pass away, people move. And that means that sometimes places have population growth and other places have decreases in population. So for example, in times of economic crisis, people might be moving from places where they were renting to cheaper places where they can find housing prices or renting prices that are much more affordable. Or they might be bunking up with family and friends, as we saw during the COVID crisis. Because of this, districts become uneven in size in population during the course of a decade. Next. So every 10 years, the federal government counts everyone in the country. That's called the census. We just did it, and it ended October 15th, 2020. After the census is finished, the district boundaries have to be redrawn to even out the number of people in each district, and that's called redistricting. In our city of 20, it has now grown to a population of 24 in the last 10 years. Next. It did not grow evenly, and so new district lines have to be drawn. Those are the lines in purple, replacing the old ones. And the new census population numbers now have each district containing 6 people. Next. Redistricting has always been used as a tool of politics to solidify power. In this example, we have a minority community that happens to live in the center of the state. Next. Now, the people who are drawing the districts might be aiming to draw districts that are perfectly compact, that is, square. But because the lines are drawn without regard to where this minority community is, or maybe it is in the intention of maximizing the votes of other people, the minority population is split into 4. This minority community cannot elect a candidate of their choice because now they're only 1/4 of each district and their votes are diluted. Next. But things could be different. If we draw the districts a different way, this community could unite to tell the line drawers to pay attention to where they are. Next. And now the lines are drawn to take into consideration the community testimony, and they've been made whole. The minority population makes up over 3/4 of the population in this middle district. After equal population, the next most important rule of redistricting is the Voting Rights Act. The Voting Rights Act can be used to provide protection to racial and ethnic minorities in a situation like this one. Now, what kind of district you end up drawing, that's a more nuanced question. And we'll be talking in much greater detail about the Voting Rights Act and how it works in part 2 of the Redistricting Community College curriculum. This is the same concept, basically, as also thinking about communities of interest. The definition of communities of interest is much broader. It can be people who share a common language, people who are all farmers, people whose health is impacted by a nearby factory, or people who in some way share culture and concerns in a way where unifying them into a district would enable them to have better representation. Next. Now let's look at a real life situation. Using your chat box at the bottom of your menu, click on that and tell us, what community do you think this picture is from? I'll give it a second. Some of you may have watched this presentation before and you might know the answer. And I'm going to give you all gold stars. I will say increasingly as I show this picture, because of the recent events, lots of people have said, Houston, Texas, Alice, somewhere cold, yes. Louisiana, Katrina, good question. Not the South. Yes. All right. So the UK. Somebody's looking really closely at that slide and looking for clues. This area is actually, this picture is taken from Watts, and it's a neighborhood in Los Angeles, which if anybody knows Southern California, you know that Los Angeles is not used to this kind of weather event. This community of Watts is historically a Black neighborhood with a large and growing Latino population. Next. Now, on November 12th, 2003, a freak storm dumped over 5 inches of rain, snow, and hail on Watts, and it overwhelmed the storm drains and flooded out the houses. What ended up happening was that 150 buildings and homes were crushed under this snow. 50,000 people lost power. People had to go to emergency centers. People had to be rescued from waist-deep water and snow. And many people lost everything they had. They had no place to live. All their possessions were flooded out. They couldn't even get to their work because the roads were clogged and their cars had been frozen. Leaders went to their elected representatives to ask for help, but it took an inordinate amount of time for anybody to respond. And why is that? Unfortunately, redistricting played a role in that. Next. So you can see here in this map, Watts is split into 3 different districts. Watts is the little area in green, that's the neighborhood. And the red lines are the district lines for congressional districts. So when community residents went to ask for help, no one congressional representative was standing up to call for federal emergency aid because everybody had a small piece of Watts, but nobody was particularly responsible for all of the community. Next. Unfortunately, that redistricting division existed not only at the congressional level, but at the state level. In state Senate seats and state assembly seats, Watts was split into 3 different districts. No wonder they couldn't get any representation. Next. So the community leaders of Watts, when they went to go ask for assistance from Congress to declare a federal emergency to help them rebuild, they weren't getting any attention because they were split into 3 districts. In fact, we talked to one congressional staffer who worked for one of those congressional members, and he says he remembers when the residents of Watts came in to ask for assistance. They actually had looked at the map and they'd figured out how many residents were in their district, And those residents were bounced from one congressional office to another because no one represented them and nobody felt entirely responsible for the care of that community. Romulo Rivera said, "This would never have happened if Watts belonged all to one district." Next. In 2011, the leaders united to testify about Watts before the California Redistricting Commission. As a result, Watts was made whole. And for the first time in this new 44th district, you can see the green lines are where the new district lines are. The 44th congressional district elected a Latina, Nanette Barragan, the first Latina to ever be elected to represent this district. We'll talk a little bit more about community mapping in part 3 of the Redistricting Community College curriculum. Next. As you learn more about redistricting, you'll want to think about the level of redistricting your organization wants to get involved in. Is it congressional? Is it state? Do you want to get involved in local redistricting? Each level may have different rules and timelines. In section 4, we'll be talking a little bit about the timelines and rules. We'll give some examples of a few states, but we'll also share resources that can help you find out more about redistricting in your own state and local area. Today, we'll also talk about the rules and timelines of redistricting, how to prepare testimony and advocacy, and how to build a coalition. These are just some of the questions that you're going to want to start thinking about right now as you prepare for all of the information that we're going to be sharing with you. Next. Once you've decided which level of government you're interested in focusing in on, you can research key questions like, will there be public hearings and when will those happen? Who makes those mapping decisions? Are there elected lawmakers who are making those decisions, or is it a commission, or is it a variation of both of these? How do we submit information to these decision makers? And is the process fair? In part 5 of the Redistricting Community College curriculum, we'll be talking about the strategies for giving amazing testimony and for watchdogging the process to make sure that it's inclusive and open. We'll have worksheets and a handbook as well that you can look at to find more information on the Redistricting Community College website. And next, last but not least, the key to changing district maps is to build strong coalitions. In part 6, we'll be talking about how to build strong alliances and coalitions to give power to your advocacy. You'll always want to ask who else should be at the table to describe our community and who else should be at our table as allies so that we can build strength in numbers. Next slide. Redistricting starts with good community organizing. Communities can get involved in redistricting by telling the story of your communities. And you are well on the way to organizing, to being heard. You've heard the story of Watts. How would you describe your community? You have the knowledge and relationship to tell your community's story best. Nobody else